the environment. I'm delighted now to get reaction from Daniel Pryor, Head of Programs at the Adam Smith Institute. Hi, Daniel.
Afternoon, Mark. Good to see you.
Daniel, the Adam Smith Institute very much extols the value of individual self-determination. So I would have thought that you reject the notion of taxing unhealthy food.
Yes, you'd be absolutely right there. I think the elephant in the room, you mentioned it already, is that unsurprisingly, if you tax something, you're going to push up the price. And our calculations, along with the Taxpayers Alliance and the Institute of Economic Affairs, suggest it would be an extra £172 per year for every household's food bill. And that might not seem like much to some, but for those who are struggling, and I'm sure that's a lot of us, especially post-pandemic and the worst recession in 300 years, it's going to hit our wallets quite hard.
But expensive for the wrong food. So this won't be the case with broccoli or ribeye steak, Daniel, or chicken drumsticks.
No, the tax design that they've proposed is actually very, very flawed. Good luck to them trying to define sold for use in processed foods and stopping manufacturers from using substitute ingredients like, say, grape juice instead of sugar. I mean, the aim of this is really the reformulation thing. And we saw this with the soft drinks levy as well, trying to get manufacturers to change their actual products. And of course, for anyone who's a fan of the original Iron Brew and Lucozade, they know how that particular story goes.
Absolutely.
So the choice here that we're left with really is forking out more of our incomes for food we actually like, or perhaps buying tiny chocolate bars because they'll try and shrink them to get around the tax, or make do with pretty tasteless food that no one really asked for.
However, we have to do something, don't we, Daniel, with exploding rates of obesity in this country. It's a health crisis. It's an enormous drain on the NHS's resources, and something like type 2 diabetes is largely lifestyle related, not exclusively. I've got listeners who have type 2 because that's genetic, but most people start to get metabolic syndrome, as it's called, high blood pressure and heart problems, as their waistline expands. So we have to do something, don't we?
Yeah, and I think that they're absolutely right to be concerned with obesity, especially in the UK, as you said. It's a serious problem. The issue is
it threatens the business model of the NHS, doesn't it?
I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I heard the report's author make this claim that, would you trade off the freedom to have Frosties in order to destroy the NHS? But the net cost to the NHS of obesity is not as large as we often make it out to be. It's not trivial, but it is a drop in the ocean compared to the hundreds of billions we spend on it annually. And often when we calculate this, we often fail to account for pretty morbid facts like overweight people tend to take out less in pension payments and things like that. So once you factor that in, it is a cost, and it is something we should be concerned about. The problem is with things like these taxes, they don't actually have a very large impact on the populations we should be targeting. So people who consume the most sugar and the most salt tend to be the least likely to actually change their behavior in response to an additional tax. They're likely to just take the extra hit because they're the people whose consumption is least responsive. Now, it did have some good things in it, this report. It wasn't exclusively the stick. There was, and if you pardon the pun, some carrot in there as well. Kind of proposals for greater education in schools, home economics you mentioned in your intro a few minutes ago, and kind of programs in local communities on healthy eating. I think that's welcome. I think that education and encouraging and helping people to make those sort of healthier choices is a good thing. But as always with these things, and especially in the past few years, sin taxes are still taking a central role.
However, if you look at something like cigarettes, for example, Daniel, sin taxes on fags seem to have been very effective because smoking has greatly reduced in the last few decades, partly because now a packet of 10 Benson and Hedges will set you back 20 B&H, set you back £10. I mean, it's an extraordinary amount of money for a packet of cigarettes, and it's very off-putting to most people, and it's therefore helping to get people off cigarettes.
Sure, and I think basic supply and demand, you massively increase the price of something, people are going to consume less of it. But that's not the end of the story. Even if you did want to put cigarette-level taxes on, things that people enjoy every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the problem is that, and you saw this with cigarettes to a certain extent, people substituting, in this case, for black market cigarettes. In this case, they're unlikely to have black market Coca-Cola in response, but they are potentially going to substitute towards other products that still have sugar in but aren't as affected by the tax. And again, this comes back to the way that it's designed. It's specifically a tax on processed foods and sugar and salt in processed foods. So if you wanted to have, say, a jar of honey which isn't processed, it would still have a huge amount of sugar in, for example.
Yes.
So you might substitute that sort of consumption. It's exactly what we saw.
And actually, you raise a brilliant point that there's as much sugar in a glass of apple juice as there is in a Coca-Cola, for example. And I think you're right that lots and lots of anomalies will emerge. Clearly, it's something of a health crisis. We've been exposed because of the pandemic to the poor state of the nation's health. Can we look at the key culprits, Daniel, which is the food industry? Is there another way to get them to pay? Because if the NHS is shouldering a greater burden because of these lifestyle-related illnesses, perhaps the food industry should pay in some way.
Well, I'd be reluctant to put it all on the food industry here. We have to remember that we're the people that are buying these foods. And unless you kind of think that we're all unthinking zombies who have no free choice in the matter, we are the ones that are choosing to buy unhealthy foods. Now, obviously, there's plenty of factors that go into that are to do with that environment. So it's not just a simple case of free choice there. But if you look at the overall calorie consumption in the UK over the past few decades, we're actually consuming less calories than we were 20 or 30 years ago. The real change has been more sedentary lifestyle. So I'm sitting here working from home at the moment, and that's kind of an extreme example.
And can I just say, Daniel, that your body is clearly a temple. No obesity in your round at yours.
Oh, if you saw my diet, you would not think that. I'm blessed with a high metabolism, and my girlfriend constantly berates me for having one. But
blessed with a high metabolism, is that on your Tinder profile? Should be.
Well, yeah, it should be if I had one, but I think I'm not sure if my girlfriend's listening right now, but of course not for me.
And there is, of course, a concern that it is the poorest in our society who will bear the brunt of any rise in taxes on so-called unhealthy food.
Yeah, definitely. And as with all sin taxes, there is a very strong regressive aspect to this. If you're someone who's really struggling to make ends meet, I'm doing okay now, but when I was a student, I didn't have very much income at all. And I remember going to the supermarket and spending, it must have been hours over the course of the time I was at university, checking the prices of, can I get this branded cereal versus the Tesco or the Sainsbury's own brand, etc. And millions of people in the UK are in that situation, even more now that we've had an income squeeze from COVID. And they're going to be looking and saying, hang on, the price of my weekly shop has gone up quite a bit. How am I going to cut down on other expenditure to compensate for that? So it's a serious problem for people. And I think it's often ignored by, Henry Dimbleby. He's done very, very well for himself through Leon. And I don't like to kind of, point out and say, someone's background, they clearly don't understand. But I do think in a lot of cases, it is just a lack of understanding of ordinary, everyday experiences for people. Actually, an increase in price of 50p for something that you buy every week is not a trivial thing.
Daniel, I'll let you get back to your Nando's. Thank you very much.